at that.
You know, if there's an opportunity to make something happen down here or try to pursue it further, I will.
Parker schnobs, but nothing could have prepared him for the wild heart of Brazilian rainforest is like entering an entirely new world. The green stretched on forever, no jungle. Somewhere in the middle of the endless green is some of the world's purest gold, $99.4 million. And Parker, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. You'd think he'd seen it all by now. He stepped out into Brazil, says it all. This is new. This is raw. This is something you can't find in Alaska or the Yukon. The mission was pretty strict. His mind was pulling off the impossible. And maybe, just maybe, learn a few tricks he could bring back to his own operation. But deep down, as in this business, where there's gold, there's always something more, something hidden, something no one talks about. So Parker sets off, in for himself. The journey to the mine wasn't just scenic. It was a reminder that places. Winding roads were barely wide enough for a truck, mud thick enough to trap even the toughest equipment. This is their turf, and they've turned the jungle into a gold field.
Is just the amount of ground. I'm just amazed that we've seen that are being mined. Normally, gold follows a bit of a pay streak, and it's generally not 1,000. Piques my interest.
The mine sits just outside Paso. No, unless you're in the business. But everyone is missing out because this region is sitting on a literal fortune. He saw a massive floating dredge churning through sediment. There were giant machines scooping up the earth like it was nothing. This wasn't some backyard panning operation. It was industrial. They knew what they were doing and they weren't here to play. Mining a fortune isn't child's play, and that is exactly what Parker wanted to find out. How realized Parker wasn't the machinery. It was the scale of the operation. The size of the mine was unreal. It was like a small city carved into their 7 with a single goal, office. And trust me, they're doing a damn good job. At the heart of the operation stood 2 men, Gilberto and his son Spotlight. There were no big speeches, no showy setup. The Brazilian jungle was hard to ignore. Even Parker, who had seen gold mining in some of the toughest conditions around the world, paid close.
That stuff has a lot of clay in it, right?
Tem muito ela aí, sabe?
It's a mess, I bet. Because the ground conditions are so bad. Is there normally a lot of gold in the clay?
Geralmente eu
Gilberto had been mining for decades. He had started small, with basic tools and very little support. Over the years, he had shaped a full-scale mining system capable of producing standards. He had done it quietly, steadily, and with a deep understanding of the land. His son had taken that foundation and added a new layer. He was younger, more technical. Drones for surveying, data to guide, cut down on waste. Mikon brought in precision and speed. Together, they had created a balance, old-school knowledge matched with modern tools. He didn't say much at first, but he watched everything, how the systems were set up, how decisions were made on the ground. This wasn't just a lucky strike. It was a well-run, carefully built machine. He asked questions, but because there was real value in what they had figured out here, it was clear to him and to anyone paying on had tapped into something that worked. In gold mine metal, it was about the systems behind it, the people who kept it moving, and the knowledge that could mean the difference between thriving for decades. One of the most surprising, heavily it relied on the river. Instead of digging into the ground or hauling dirt from deep pits, the large machines that essentially acted as mining boats.
A lot of places use trommels that are floating them with an excavator from the land. And so they'll sit on the bank of a boat, and then they just move the pond with them. Has he seen that kind of system before?
They skimmed across the material and separating out the gold from everything else. Parker watched as the dredges worked in a steady rhythm, pulling up a constant stream of sand, clay. Material was sent through a series of onboard systems that filtered and processed it in real time. And clearly well practiced. Everything about the process was fast and efficient. There was no trial and error. The operators knew exactly what they were at a specific purpose. It wasn't the kind of gold panning, no digging with shovels. This was industrial scale mining, designed for volume, like a moving belt, delivering material to the dredges nonstop. Still, he had questions. Could the river keep producing gold at this rate? And what would happen when the easy material ran out? The system worked. The long-term impact? That was harder to predict. What really sets this place apart is the custom-built tons and was completely fabricated on site. Yeah, jungle, without access to any major manufacturing facilities, these guys built a massive industrial-grade wash plant from scratch. Why don't we have something like this back home? And it's not just the size. Every nut, bolt, and weld has a purpose. There's no wasted space, no wasted movement. It's built to survive.
Obviously, Gilberto and Michael here, their recovery rate, improve their efficiency, and run a good operation. And I love that. A lot of thought went into this plan. A solution, albeit big and cumbersome in terms of
This kind of innovation only comes when your back is against the wall. When the nearest hardware store is 100 miles away and downtime. It's a gritty, raw engineering genius. Putting it all in. The real story of the mine wasn't just in the digging, it was in what came after. What happened ground? That was where things got interesting, flakes or dust. The gold that came out of this place ended up as solid bars, heavy, purity, But the journey from muddy sediment to a finished bar of gold was anything but simple. The first step involved mercury, gold particles that were too small to be caught by traditional methods. Once the gold stuck to the mercury, the mixture was. What was left behind was raw, gleaming gold. It was a method that had been used for years in different parts of the world. Effective, yet mercury could be dangerous, especially for the environment. The team at the mine worked carefully to contain and control. The process was fast and efficient, but it carried a quiet tension underneath. Then came the part that felt almost ceremonial, the smelting, until it turned molten, glowing bright orange as it reached its melting point. It was then poured into molds, filling them with liquid metal that slowly cooled. Each bar was stamped with its weight and purity, then set aside like a finished product rolling off an invisible assembly line. There was something magnetic. Watching rough, dirty material turn into something that looked flawless was both technical and oddly satisfying. It was the years of experience, precision, and control. Still, for all its brilliance, the process raised questions. Used this way before it caused damage that couldn't be undone, and if not mercury, what came first? But the method? That part remained a little murky. Tucked deep, Pelada, a name once known around the world. Decades ago, it had been the epicenter of Brazil's biggest gold rush. Now it looked more like a scar left. The site had changed. What used to be a hive of human activity was now a wide, water-filled crater.
They found something like 2.6 hole. Like, how much was that question really bothers me.
The surrounding land, once stripped bare, had begun to recover. Grass pushed through the dirt. But the damage and the history couldn't be hidden. In the early 1980s, men, all chasing the same thing, gold. They came with shovels, sacks, and whatever tools they could. But they came anyway, pulled by the hope of striking it rich. The story side by side in steep makeshift pits, earth moving by hand, weeks. It wasn't organized, it wasn't safe, but it was real. And for a while, it worked. A few walked away with fortunes. Others were buried in mudslides, caught in fights, or simply faded into the crowd. Empta was a place where dreams and desperation lived side by side. Now, the chaos was gone. The noise, replaced by wind and water. But the past still hung in the air, thick, heavy. What made it powerful wasn't just what had happened there, but how fast. The rush, the madness, the collapse. It was a reminder that even the richest gold strikes don't last forever. And behind stories, most of them unfinished. At the center of the mine's workshop, the floor, molten gold glowing bright and almost white-hot, flowed steadily. The heat from the metal filled the air, the room. For a few seconds, everything slowed down. No machines buzzed. All eyes were on the liquid metal settling into shape. Then came the stillness. Steam rose. The surface hardened, changing color with each passing second. From a fiery glow, no longer just metal. It was now a gold bar, a finished product. A physical result of weeks, sometimes months, of work, digging. The room stayed quiet, not out of ceremony, but because everyone understood what that bar represented. Kilograms. It carried the story of the ground it came from, the machines that moved it, the hands that managed it. When the 9.9% purity, there were no cheers, just quiet satisfaction. The job had been done right. That was proof that the system worked. Beneath layers of clay and stone, waiting to be pulled out by those who knew how.
Today was days that I've had on a gold mine. Some of the friendliest gold miners I've ever met. They have on their drilling hard rock. Nobody in the Yukon does that.
As a reminder, gold was more than a mineral. It was a goal, a chase. Others never would. It was a reward, earned, not given. Before the visit ended, Mikon and Hilbert, they talked about how the mine had grown, the systems they had built from the ground up. There had been setbacks, weather, but each one had pushed them to find new ways forward. The strength of the operation wasn't just in its adapted. The mine was fast but careful, large but controlled, most of what was available, without pushing the land too far. It wasn't perfect. What made it stand out wasn't a secret machine or some rare trick. It was the mindset. A steady focus on solving problems long term. In the world of gold mining, nothing stayed the same for long. Equipment failed. The ones who lasted weren't always the biggest. They were the ones who could adjust. That was the real lesson Parker had come for. Adapt, improve, and keep going. Survival depended on more than just finding gold. It depended on knowing how to stay ahead of the next challenge, even when you didn't. As Parker's visit came to an end, the mine stood quiet for a moment. The machine still ran and the crew kept working, but there was a noticeable pause, breath. The mine wasn't just a place where gold was pulled from the ground. It was a system, a mine possible when experience, risk, and vision came together. What had started as an idea in the middle of the forest had become a model. Always need to shout. Sometimes it just needed to work. This was clear. The gold had value, yes, the effort. The decisions made under pressure, the setbacks faced without giving up, and the trust built between people who worked side by side. Did the land, even while pushing it to give more. When Parker looked closely, he realized the truth. Going. Not lucky people, but rather people who were consistent in their efforts.
We've struggled with crew a lot. It's definitely an issue. All I've got to offer is a job.
Oh boy. Tensions are high with Parker, and turns out Parker and his team are working with a bit of a handicap because they didn't have their full crew at this point in time. Which meant that, of course, this means that they will be unable to get all the gold that is down there. This must have been really frustrating for the team, but even more so for Parker, because season was to make this season a record-breaking season, because if they were able to get a good chunk of gold, he just meant for him and his men to carry out their digs. Well, with a lack of workers, Parker just had to endure the fact that he had to shut his operations down. With him, his goals would prove to be impossible to achieve. Mitch also he knew that this was the best time for them to be digging out there, and he just could not imagine how they were going to get their work done without they were even losing money. And as such, he was forced to agree with Parker, who decided to shut down their wash plants as they didn't have enough people to feed. As everything came to a standstill, the silence in the mines was deafening. How on earth without enough miners? Looking for answers, how are they going to get out of this sticky situation? He knew that they were right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as such, difficult to accomplish. That said, he implored the boss to not achieve what they set out to achieve that season. To nobody's surprise, Parker agreed with Mitch some more workers. His goals were hanging by a thread, and if he didn't do something, they were not going to get their hands on the gold there. However, the problem was that if they were going to get any workers, Parker feared that they would be workers that had, from his own experience, getting workers without experience is almost as bad, if not worse, than getting nobody to come out there. Their equipment. Regardless, Mitch didn't care. He would rather get these inexperienced workers hands such as theirs out there. They may be able to guide the green miners in a way that would help them. Mitch was ready to train them if need be. All he wanted was for Parker to get them out there as quickly as he could. Well, Parker had received his march to get these workers as quickly as possible. Let's just see what he's able to come up with. It won't be easy, but as the boss, he had no on deck. Luckily for Parker, he was able to get his hands on 2 miners. But he knew that any good miner out there would not be working on other mines. He would just have to make do with these 2 new miners. Experiment with these new miners would end, but they just had to try with them. With any luck, if you're on the lookout for more Gold Rush content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Must have been pleased that through the valuable pay dirt at Scribner Creek. With Monique Stone, a seasoned operator working hard as well, there was every chance that Parker and his team. It seems as if all eyes were on our rookie, Portuguese miner, Tatiana Costa. She had been hired to help the team out by working on was that not only was this her first ever mining season, but this also fed a wash plant. As such, this was not going to be an easy gig at all. Thankfully, Mitch Parker's right-hand man, he was going to make sure that everything went well with this rookie. As such, he was guidance that she needed to get this job done. He directed her to get as much height as she could. Although Tatiana seemed to be nervous at the start, it suited the job. For Mitch, he knew that it would be difficult for him to hand this job over to someone that was as green as Tatiana, especially as he didn't want anything bad to happen there. And if you didn't give new people a chance, how else were they going to learn? Over some time, we could see Tatiana's confidence grow, confident enough to give her the remote for dumping the grizzlies, while he went off to do some digging of his own. After letting her know that she could reach out to him the pair went to work. With any luck, the team was to help Parker achieve his record-breaking goal. As such, they needed to move as quickly as possible. Thankfully, that was ready to get her hands dirty. Let's see what they will be able to. After some time and hard work, Parker and his team, they could see how much gold they had been able to gather that week, proven to be difficult to overcome recently. But luckily, they were actually able to get some work done, thanks to the recruitment of the rookies. To answer was how much gold the team had been able to gather. With that in mind, the next thing for them to do was to see how much. They were kind of nervous because on average, they gathered about 200 ounces of gold per week this season with Big Red. Big jar that they had on their hands, their mood picked up. Well, all worries seemed to evaporate as they poured their gold onto the scale. The first jar seems to continue to spill out. They realized that Big Red had helped them gather about 3, while Slucifer also did very well by helping them gather about 272.95 ounces of gold, 629 ounces of gold that week. Amazing, right? Especially as in 303 ounces for the season so far. Talk about a record-breaking season, especially as 629 ounces was worth about 1.1. Such, we can see that it is actually possible for Parker and the team to get all the money that they needed to get the new ground to expand his operations. This would help Parker and his team get through their rush for that precious gold. Want to see more gold, lost treasures, hidden riches, and legendary gold discoveries?